Hey, Katie. We have The Haunted Bridge. We are on chapter 11, Telephone Disguise. Determined to learn the cause of the weird scream, Nancy flung open the cabin door. "Don't leave me here alone," Bess pleaded. Her words fell on deaf ears. The young detective had darted out into the rain. She moved swiftly toward the rear of the cabin, certain that the cry had come from there. Nancy glanced about quickly, but could see no one in the well-tended flower and vegetable garden or in the greenhouse. A few feet beyond, among the trees, she caught sight of a gleaming metallic object and hurried toward it. As she drew closer, Nancy was surprised to find that the gleam came from the heavy wired netting of a roofed wild animal cage. Nancy's amazement grew as she observed that in it was a young mountain lion. She wondered if it belonged to Joe Haley. The animal stopped pacing to raise its head and give a blood-chilling howl. "So you don't trust me," said Nancy, grinning. "Anyway, you've solved part of the mystery of the terrible screams we've been hearing." She turned and started toward the cabin. Midway across the clearing, Nancy saw Bess in the doorway motioning frantically. Probably like, "Nancy, come here quickly," she called out. Nancy reached her, thoroughly drenched from the rain and breathless from running. "What is it, Bess?" she asked. He, she said, indicating the wounded man on the bed, "started mumbling. I thought it might be important." "Could you make out any of the words?" Nancy asked. "He murmured something about a Miss Margaret a moment ago," Bess replied. As Nancy seated herself at the bedside, Mr. Haley began to toss restlessly on his pillow. It was difficult to restrain him. Then, for several minutes, the patient lay perfectly still. His eyelids fluttered open and he mumbled, "Please, Miss Margaret, don't stay away. I can't find it. I've tried, but I can't." Mr. Haley's words ended in an incoherent mumble. "What do you suppose he's been trying to find?" Bess asked. Nancy shook her head. Just then, Bess cried out, "What was that? I thought I heard a voice in the woods." Nancy opened the cabin door, glad to find the rain had stopped. She stared in astonishment as 6 persons emerged from among the trees. George and Dr. Ackerman were in the lead. Directly behind them were Carson Drew and Ned Nickerson. Then came Bert Edelton, George's friend, and Dave Evans, who dated Bess. "Hi," said everyone. Nancy immediately led Dr. Ackerman to the patient, whom he said he did not know. The physician asked her to remain while he made his examination, in case he wanted her to get something for him. Presently, Nancy asked, "Is Mr. Haley badly injured?" "I don't think so," he replied without looking up. "The bullet only grazed him." Mr. Drew had joined Nancy. Together they watched quietly as the physician dressed the man's wound. When he was finished, Mr. Haley stirred and moaned. "He's coming around now," said the doctor. "Would it be advisable to transfer him to a hospital?" asked Mr. Drew. "It's not necessary," replied the physician. "He's lost a little blood, and, of course, he is feeling the shock of the accident. But if he remains quiet and has good care, he should be all right before too long." Regretfully, Nancy realized that she would not be able to question Mr. Haley in his weakened condition. "I'll give him a sedative, so something to help him sleep," said the doctor, "and stop by to see him tomorrow." While he finished taking care of the injured man, Nancy and her father went back to the outer room and reported to the others. "Who will take care of Mr. Haley?" asked Bess. "I'll remain," Nancy offered quickly. "That would mean you couldn't finish the golf tournament," said George. "And you have an excellent chance to win. Why not have a nurse?" "A man is really needed around here," Nancy commented, and told about the mountain lion penned nearby. Bess gasped. "Is that what we heard?" "Yes," Nancy replied. Ned spoke up. "How about Bert and Dave and me staying?" he proposed. "We've all had first aid and camping experience. We could look after everything." We'd be glad to do it, Dave added, and Bert nodded in agreement. That would be a wonderful solution to the problem, Nancy said in relief, but it doesn't seem fair to you after coming to Deer Mountain for a good time. Ned shrugged. It would cost us a lot to stay at the hotel, he said with a grin. This place is good enough. After some discussion, it was finally decided that the three boys would remain at the cabin. Dr. Ackerman approved and gave careful instructions for the care of the patient. Mr. Haley may be slow in getting his strength back, said the doctor. He's been neglecting himself, I think. See that he gets plenty of hearty food and lots of sleep. Don't worry, we'll look after him, said Ned. And don't forget the wild beast, Bess reminded the boys. What is one supposed to feed a young mountain lion? Ned asked. We'll have some raw meat sent out when we get back from town, Mr. Drew promised, as well as a few other necessities that you may need here. Nancy took Ned aside so the others could not hear what she was saying. There's something I wish you'd do for me, Ned. Sure, what is it? Please listen very carefully to anything Mr. Haley says, whether he's conscious or talking in his sleep. Ned glanced at Nancy, but he refrained from asking for an explanation, even though he regarded the request as strange. I'd be glad to, he promised. I wish you'd take down every word in writing, Nancy added as she turned to leave the cabin. The solution of a very complex mystery may be in your hands. Ned smiled. Bet I'll solve it for you. Then they said good night. Dr. Ackerman had brought his own car and went off alone. As the three girls rode with Mr. Drew to Deer Mountain Hotel, Nancy asked, By the way, Dad, did you win your tennis match against Mr. Bartescu? No, he defeated me in 2 out of 3 sets, Mr. Drew admitted ruefully. Oh, I was certain you'd beat him, Dad. He must be a good player. Far better than I expected. We had a few close decisions as to whether balls were inside or outside the court, but I'm offering no alibis, so no excuses. A defeat now and then is good for anyone, Mr. Drew chuckled. At the hotel, the lawyer explained to Nancy that it was necessary for him to drive to the village. I'll buy supplies for the boys. While I'm there, I'll check out an important lead in connection with my case. After her father had driven away, Nancy and the other girls inquired at the hotel desk for mail. There were letters for Bess and George from their parents. Nancy found a note and a small package waiting for her. She studied the handwriting on them curiously. Hurry up and open the box, Bess urged. I can't imagine what it contains. Nancy removed the wrapping. She held up a golf ball for her friends to see. The gift had come from Martin Bartescu. His name was autographed neatly across the face of the ball. That note must explain about it, Bess declared. Nancy tore open the envelope and found a message from Barty. I'm sending you this ball to replace the one you lost. Use it in the tournament tomorrow and win. Nancy was amused. I guess he thinks his autograph is just as important as Jimmy Harlow's. Will you use the ball tomorrow? Bess inquired mischievously. Nancy shrugged. Then, after a moment's pause, she announced, No, but I'll keep it as a specimen in Mr. Bartescu's handwriting. Why does he always use a different signature? George asked. His handwriting never seems to be the same twice. I have a theory that he may be a forger, Nancy said in an undertone. So, a forger is someone who, they're like faking someone else's signature or someone else's writing. It's illegal to do that. Then why not report him to the police? George suggested. Not yet. By playing a waiting game, we may learn far more than we would if we were to expose the man immediately. In her imagination, she could see him linked with the jewel thieves. His acquaintance with the mysterious Margaret Judson, as well as his suspicious trick of altering his signature, perhaps to avoid identification, made it easy to visualize him as one of the gang. A few minutes later in her room, Nancy reflected soberly. Through Barty, I might be able to trace Margaret Judson, and I must find her. Impulsively, she looked at her watch, then sprang from her chair. Slipping into a coat, she said, I'm taking the bus to town. Tell you why later. There was no time to explain to Bess and George what she meant to do. The bus for town would leave the hotel in less than 5 minutes. Nancy was the last passenger aboard. When the bus pulled away, she wondered if she should have waited until she had consulted her father about her plan. At the village, she alighted and entered a drugstore. After making a purchase, she stepped into a telephone booth. Summoning her courage, she called Deer Mountain Hotel and asked to speak with Mr. Martin Bartescu. "It'll be just my luck for him to be out," she thought anxiously. Half a minute later, she heard the man's voice on the other end of the line.
"Hello? Who is this?"
he demanded, as Nancy, overcome by nervousness, remained silent. "This is Miss Judson," Nancy stammered, trying to speak in a nasal tone.
Your voice doesn't sound natural."
"I have a bad cold, so that's might be nasally."
"What is it you wish, Miss Judson? You know it isn't a good idea to call me out here."
"I must speak with you about a very important matter. Can you meet me tonight?"
Bartescu grumbled. "I suppose so. Where shall we meet?"
"The same place and time as before."
"What's the matter with 2BX Gardenia?"
Nancy was puzzled by the question, and for a moment could not think of anything to say. She did not have the slightest idea as to what 2BX Gardenia, gardenia is a type of flower, could mean. In sheer desperation, she mumbled into the telephone, "Nothing but the weather," and hung up before the man could reply. As Nancy walked to the bus stop, she felt excited but also scared. Had Martin Bartescu guessed who was calling? Was 2BX Gardenia a code for a meeting place? And if so, where was it? I don't know, I'll have to find out.